Okay, it's gonna go. Where's freaking OBS? Go live. I think it's going. Looks like it's going.
Red leader, standing by. Red
So
2, standing by.
Yeah. So for the last few plates of my postcard print,
Mm-hmm.
I was streaming it just kind of like this
Uh-huh.
into the void. And I still feel like an idiot for like the last one. I actually didn't tell it to like go live. And so I spent like 2 hours carving and went to like end the stream, and instead it started it and then ended it, and it was like actually only like a 30-second stream. And I was like, well, I'm an idiot. I just like didn't bother to like really look at what was going on. So it was just streaming nothing.
I guess I'll send this to my family.
This is another one of those things where there's like honestly way too much to cover.
Oh, there's so too much. I had read this like years ago, and I remembered it was just, I was like, oh yeah, I enjoyed that. It was fun to read. I don't know. Reading it this time, I was like, I don't remember this being like this dense brick of a...
I mean, he says in the... I'm like a mile away. Just lighting this up because on the thing it looks so depressing. It's a nice little composition, actually, with the little orange and the...
Dude, I learned a few things from Book of Tea this last time.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of taken the no symmetry ever to heart. And that's the kind of the thing. Actually, the funny thing is, I kept putting off reading this, and actually went through Art of Tea again, or Book of Tea.
Yeah.
And I was like, it takes me like, this is like the 5th time I've read this or something, and finally I feel like I'm getting stuff out of it. So.
Oh, this is going.
Yeah, I turned it down.
Okay. The water is steaming.
All right.
But anyway,
I've
been interested in poetry lately. Because I mean, part of it is I started doing haikus with the little business cards I've been making,
Mm-hmm.
which I've started to compile more. At least today I decided I was going to be a little bit more meticulous in compiling it instead of just it being such a haphazard thing. So now I'm actually like scanning them and titling them and dating it, and I'm actually going to kind of keep together all of that just to compile it, potentially into like little volumes. But then I started to be more interested in other more long-form poetry, which I still am not sure how to go about the right way. But right before we went live, I mentioned that I didn't enjoy doing poetry in school because they didn't teach it in a way that was good. They didn't teach it well. Like, I already didn't really like English class. It was my least favorite subject. But whenever we'd do poetry, it always just felt like, what does this mean? Almost like treating it like it was some kind of puzzle that had like a correct answer to it. And it always was like very frustrating. And then as I've done this stuff and I've like read more poetry, I'm like, it's actually just like painting, but just with like language. It doesn't have to have some riddle to it. It can just be simply painting a beautiful scene. It's like, oh, that's a lot more interesting than trying to like find some, it's like not some problem to be solved, but it's actually like a piece to be enjoyed and to like take in and experience. Because I just remember always like in class like, oh well, what does this word mean? Then you'd like move to the next word. You'd like look through it like word by word, and it's like that's not how. It's not actually how that works.
Is this? What are you seeing? I can't actually.
Oh, they're just seeing the camera.
It's a beautiful composition.
It's beauty.
Yeah, it's called
Pure.
it's called, citruses, citrusin.
This is the answer to the title of Tolstoy's essay. It is art. I mean, if you're gonna go by Tolstoy's idea of what art is, it's definitely not.
Unless a lime. I mean, it's got a piece of art in it, which would be the orange, I guess.
But would he even consider that? Does it? Are you infected with the feeling
yeah,
of
I don't
that I
know.
intentionally conveyed to you when I created that?
I don't know. I mean, it's from my point of view, which is not the image. It's pretty refreshing. I just like looking at limes.
Though he does say that like paintings of like landscapes and things like that can be art.
Yeah. Feelings.
Which
Hey.
like when he goes into that, it's interesting because a lot of stuff he's saying up until that point, you're like, oh my gosh, is anything art according to him?
Well,
but he starts getting into like how decorative art can be art.
yeah. Well,
Which sounds counterintuitive to some of the other stuff he says, where he's talking about.
he kind of turns around and he's like, actually, a whole lot of stuff could be art.
Yeah.
Like even way more than. Again, like you said, is taught in like a class or something. Like a lot of stuff could be art.
Yeah.
But
because basically he's just fundamentally saying that art is it has to be intentional and it has to be effective. Like you're intentionally creating something with like a sentiment, and that you're communicating that through your creation.
mm-hmm.
And if it infects people with that sentiment, then it is art. And basically the more people it can infect, the greater the art is. Would you say that's like a fair kind of simplification?
No, yeah, yeah. It's
of
like
what he considers to be actual art.
yeah, it's communicating a. He calls it a communion a bunch.
Yeah. Well, it's he very much treats it because he talks about art as being like a fundamentally spiritual and religious thing.
Yeah.
Like he's like considering it as like a fundamental part of like humanity's spiritual nature.
Yeah, it's so yeah, what you said, and then it's communicating a feeling. So art's just the way we communicate a feeling. Like plain old words would be the way we communicate like an abstract idea. That he didn't say that. That's me.
I mean, he has somewhere where he kind of talks about that, where he's like,
but he does
for like writing down like if you were to write down a recipe, you're communicating to somebody in the future or somebody somewhere else.
Yeah.
How to make a cake. Right? It's like that information, but like doing a painting with actual like sentiment to infect somebody with it, you're actually communicating the emotion through space and time.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that you could use writing to convey information. But yeah. But I'd say probably most of it is him like going into what isn't art, according to him,
Yeah.
which is I enjoy. It kind of fits with a lot of the stuff we've been like going over. It's like basically cranky old men complaining about stuff.
Hey, that is it. That's because that's what all I want to be. It's just a cranky old man.
That's what we are now.
But it's what I'm aspiring
But-
to, but I must learn the ways.
I know. Because it's like, I mean, he spends like a whole chapter or maybe even multiple chapters like dissecting Wagner's Ring or whatever it's called, the Ring or the. He like basically runs through the whole thing and is like, this is why this is counterfeit. It's like really interesting. He also rags on French poets of his day. He spends a lot of time on that, talking about how incomprehensible they are.
Well, it's funny because he like the first part of the book, he's basically like going through theories and doing that, and then he like explains his theory, and then for the rest he like just takes everyone else to task.
Yeah.
So he like spends the first time being like, here's a theory, here's a theory, here's a theory. He's not like actually a lot of them he's like, yeah, it's got like one or two things right, but
he goes through a lot.
yeah.
I mean, he does like quick rundowns, and he like has like a whole
I don't know if your
categorizing of everything.
Yeah, I don't know if your book has mine has these little headers at the beginning. Does your book have these little italicized headers from like the translator?
No, I was like reading a PDF.
Yeah, it has this little italicized headers, and there was one of the early chapters or one of the early sections, whatever, that is like where he's just listing off like he's like shotgunning art theories.
Yeah.
Oh, I should just read what the translator said. But he's basically like, this doesn't have any of his actual stuff in it, so you can skim over this if you want. Which is kind of a funny thing for a translator to say.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm not gonna skim over this. This is like the fun part.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting because, I mean, he goes through a bunch of things, and I've basically read, like, none of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So it was helpful in a way. And it was kind of interesting going through, and he's, like, going through, and it's like, oh, that's an interesting thought. And then you just, like, go through all these different ones, and you're like, okay, now I'm starting to be, like, confused. Because you're almost like, well, some of these are, like, very opposed to the other, which, I mean, that's not surprising, because you have a bunch of different people from different places and times that have different ideas. But, and I don't know if Tolstoy's even right, because I think it's one of those things where it's almost like too complicated to actually be able to truly explain.
Yeah.
Hence why when people try to explain it, it's like kind of incomprehensible in a way when you start like trying to go through everything. But I do like his approach to it and his thought of it as kind of a communication thing.
Yeah, and he in the very beginning he doesn't say that about his own theory, but he kind of says where he's like, people have been like working at this problem for like 200 years or whatever, and nobody's figured anything out.
Yeah.
So, oh, the lime. Here, wait. I'm gonna start making the tea, which is what a drink I've been making, which I call a lime cream. Well, this would be a lime cream matcha.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah, it's way good. Real fast, not to backtrack too far.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, or maybe not. I was just as if Madeline's here, Hand reveal. Oh no! Did somebody?
Hand cam.
People have screenshotted it, and now it's on the internet.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to all those hand.
You're gonna get doxxed now.
Gonna go. Well, they're gonna send my hand to all those hand websites.
Yeah.
I don't know. Madeline teaches some poetry stuff, and apparently her kids are really into it because I also remember it being taught in like the most dreadful way. Also, I don't think I was taught poetry. I'm pretty sure, at least, or it didn't sink in one drop until I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's I have a tough time with poetry. But I have discovered over the years a few I like. Any that you've been digging?
There's actually a few of them in that book that I like. I mean, the first one is it Tennyson. I think is the first one in there. Lord Tennyson.
This is Philip's sweet thrift store book. Thrift store books are the best.
Yeah, no, that was like a cool find. But Tennyson's actually really good. He's old school, but it's delayed, so you're gonna.
Delayed. Okay.
Yeah. So.
How delayed? Extremely delayed.
If we look,
it's
you
fine.
can see it better on this.
It's fine.
This is.
I'm putting it here
instantaneous.
for aesthetics.
All right.
Ooh, I was kind of hoping.
Veritas.
I was kind of hoping the cord was just in the shot a little bit. All right.
But there's some good ones in there. But yeah.
I kind of like.
But it's like very, very casual at the moment. I'm not hardcore with it at all. It's kind of more like me trying to like teach myself how to like think about it more, because my school experience with it was useless. Because now that I'm like trying to learn other more than just like haikus where it's just you're counting syllables.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to like learn sonnets is weird because I'm like, I don't intuitively get like the feet and the all that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get it, but also I don't, and I like overthink it. I'm like, wait, how does the emphasis on the words work? Because you're not counting syllables really, and then you have like weird syllables that kind of count but don't. I don't know. Anyway, that's for another time because I don't know nearly enough to really talk on it in a way that I'll just sound like an idiot.
So I didn't mean to,
but
like
it's fun to
like
learn about now.
Walk us all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, but sorry about that.
No, that's good.
Oh, here's the thing. Whoa! Do you have any salt? Also,
I do have salt.
I'm gonna lime your book. Let me have a little salt.
That's fine. That book can handle some lime. Where is the salt? I think there's one right there. But it might be
This is international cooking with Casey.
I have some black pepper. Hold on. There's salt. There's a big chunk of salt. What is it?
I mean, it does not matter. Although now I don't know what to do with my very limed hand. Smells. Okay.
Also, there's baby wipes.
Baby wipes would be way better. For all the babies in the art studio.
I need to get more of these. A little bit lower. And trash cans right there.
Thank you, Madeline, for your engagement. Okay.
Yeah, poetry's cool. Even though school made it seem lame. You don't get to see the baby wipes. You just get to hear about them.
I mean, you can if you pay for premium.
Yeah. become a channel member. I don't even know if you can do that on this channel. It doesn't. It has 1 subscriber.
We have a subscriber?
I don't know if there's like subscriber requirements.
This isn't even open.
No, because I have another one. I got that the other day.
What the fancy saw is this? All right. But yeah,
Some saffron. Do you want to put some saffron in there? I've been making like a little saffron tea.
Oh, dude, how's
'Cause
that?
It's good. I'm trying to decide whether it's making me happier or not. I think so.
That's the rumor.
I suspect it is. I'll have that with like some hot honey and some green tea
Oh man,
and then some chia seeds.
you're beating me at my own game.
And I just like when I get up in the morning, I just set that up, let it steep for a bit. Ooh. It's crazy looking.
Sure is. I don't even know what the doesn't look great on there.
I know, it looks kind of crazy
It
on
will,
there.
Oh, it will.
You have a nicer frother than I do. Mine is janky. But it's probably about as effective. I like your thumb press on there.
Yeah, my brother.
Mine's like awkward. You have to like hold it the other way around.
My brother gave this to me, and I was like, "What on earth am I gonna do with this?" And it like sat on the shelf for 2 years.
And I use it every day.
And now I frothed it. I froth things.
It was mostly kind of earthy and a little bit herby. I haven't put that much honey in it. Like the one I had this morning, I put like a little bit of honey in it. I kind of want to do more. I mostly just didn't want it to be like super sweet.
All right.
I also like, I kind of like the texture of chia seeds in a thing where they get like that weird like gelatinous sphere.
Which is Philip's teacup? This one? Or this one? I don't
If
even
you can even see it. Hold on.
Are they going to shot?
Halfway.
Yeah.
There you go.
Look at how professional this all is. Got our poetry book.
It's a real tea party.
Yeah, no, we're having a tea party. All of the No, wait for responses. All of the Japanese dudes we've talked about would be mad at us for adding all this junk to the tea.
Whatever, we're not Japanese, so those rules don't actually count for us. I don't make the rules.
Mound's on one. All right. Well, that's a tough. They split the vote. Which one do you want?
I like this one.
All right.
The extra purple flower one.
Extra fancy. Although Yeah, where's that one made?
Japan. Mikasa fine ivory.
Mikasa
Margot.
Sukasa.
Japan. It's pretty awesome. I like this.
I got these. Speaking of thrift, I got a whole bunch of these like funny tea sets, but not funny. These little cup and saucer combos from the DI.
Nice. They're pretty awesome.
Yeah, they actually kind of were. It was. I've gone back other times and there aren't any at all. But there was this day where there was just 3, and they're all really.
I like the little like lemon
The little lime
pearls and
Yeah.
lime pods in there.
All right.
Hold on. This is tricky.
Oh. I know.
I got it.
All right.
I have to set this down here. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see my tea. There's not enough camera space at the moment. Actually, we could zoom in really close. Okay.
Ow.
Oh, he poured it all into one cup.
All
This
that
is
honey.
like as
I-
much tea as we drink in like an episode, pretty much. There's a lot of honey in there.
I'm working.
Now I'm
with-
like looking at it, I'm like, oh, that was all just one cup.
Is it painfully sweet? I'm kind of iffy with the honey.
I mean, it's good.
Is it
Is
painfully
that-
sweet? Because I put less honey
that
in
was-
this one.
That's probably a good amount of honey. I really like honey, so I'm
Okay.
fine with it. But it could,
I'm
for the sake of balancing flavors, I'd say it
Sure.
doesn't need as much as mine got. But
okay. I was gonna say if you could have almost had the second one, but it's too
well,
late.
too late.
Yeah.
No, it's still nice though. I like this. But yeah, what's his bucket who wrote Book of Tea would not approve of this.
Yeah, he'd be like, "Wait, you're adding stuff to tea?" And I would retort with, "This is matcha from the grocery store in Utah in the United States, and it's not really drinkable on its own." And this one's actually pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've drank it a couple times on its own.
It's almost like one that you'd want to use like in like culinary use or something. Like,
Yeah.
make a cake with it.
Yeah,
Then it would be good.
it's better than a lot of them that I've tried. This one
Mhm.
is. Like I've drunk it on its own a couple times. Like it smells really nice, which is on its own
Mm-hmm.
a victory. A lot of them don't even smell good. And then the taste is good too. It's just like all of the cheap matchas here, it's just super bitter. It's like undrinkably bitter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it's not a quarter cup of honey. It's
I mean, mine had probably almost
yours had a lot more than
like twice as much.
yours.
It's quite a bit.
It's because usually I add the honey after, and I add the honey on top of, or I added your honey first, and then I was like, oh no, I've forgotten, like,
I mean, it might not be a bad way to do it because then you can know exactly how much you're putting in.
well, that's what I was thinking, but this is the way I'm used to
But then you're
doing
like,
it.
wait, I don't know how much makes sense.
Yeah.
I definitely get the lime though. The lime's nice.
Yeah, oh, I almost added more honey on accident.
Just do like a whole thing of honey.
Yeah, I've been, like, semi-inventing fun little drinks at home with the hope that someday I can treat people to them.
I mean, it's really fun to do.
Yeah.
At Piper and Tom's, sometimes I'll use, because they always have LaCroix, and I'll get out the flavor Bible and I'll be like, what goes with coconut? Because they have coconut LaCroix, and then you use that and kind of grab some things out of the fridge and use a little frother. You can make like little like almost like Italian soda things out of them. What I find is really good with LaCroix is using maple syrup to sweeten it. Because most of the flavors that they use go well with maple syrup. So, that's pretty cool. Like orange juice and maple syrup with like a coconut LaCroix is actually really good. Put a little bit of cream in there.
That sounds great. Orange. I've been like basically doing this, but with oranges too, and then I add vanilla.
Ooh,
It's really good. And sorry, Madeline, that I haven't. I mean, I've been making the lime, just like the lime and whatever, the condensed milk drink a lot.
that's really good.
That's super duper good. That's like better than all this fanciness. Actually, that's not true. I like the whole like ginger cinnamon is a pretty winning combo.
Something that I wanted to do with the thing I made this morning that I was talking about is I wanted some crystallized ginger. That's originally what I wanted to sweeten it with. Instead, I went with hot honey. But I couldn't find any crystallized ginger. There used to always be like a bunch at Smith's.
Well,
And I haven't seen any.
Here's what we do next year. We do like a little drink stand at the farmer's market. We just have all like these.
It'd be fun.
It would be super fun. Have all these.
I have a food handler's permit.
Oh, dude.
I mean, technically, you would have to get one too. But it's not hard.
We could
We
have.
wouldn't have to like really be cooking a whole lot, so it'd be like pretty easy.
See, now mine, I almost wish I could have a little more honey.
Yeah, Sprouts probably has crystallized ginger. I just haven't felt like traveling that far for it. I just wonder what would happen, like, if you put that in, like, hot water, what happens?
Explodes.
Would it, like, dissolve? Or would it just, like, suck all the sugar out of it? And then you just have, like, a dried piece of ginger in there. I don't know. I don't know what happens. Anyway.
Yeah, Leo Tolstoy.
Yeah. Our tangents on drinks and poetry. But yeah.
Like the so far the main boss of Grouchy Old Guys. Pucci looks like it too.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love the way he opens the essay is basically him like complaining about this opera that he's like going to the recital for.
Yeah.
And the way he talks about it is so good. He kind of in a way synopsizes his kind of view on everything just through like relating his experience going to this rehearsal. But when he's at the end, when he's like talking about, it's like, who is this for? Like, why is everybody, why are all the artists going through all this trouble? Why is the conductor like taking this so seriously? He's just like, this isn't even like a good opera. It's just an okay one. It's the okayest opera. It's just predictable. There's nothing interesting about it, but yet they're treating it so seriously. And who is this for? I don't remember where it was, but like early on, he basically like is like, I don't know who this is for, and if somebody enjoys this, and then in parentheses is like, which is doubtful. It's like, why? He's basically, because it's basically his day's equivalent of like a musical, and he's essentially like, nobody likes this, actually. It's gonna be like, nobody actually likes musicals. It's like, why is this being made? And then he goes into going into all of his thoughts on it.
Yeah, for the listener, to summarize that first, because it's kind of fun, is he just got to visit an opera recital before the opening night, and his host is taking him backstage, and they're like, he's talking about walking past the like dozens of sweaty, sad workers who are like lugging ropes around and like
moving all the set around and doing all the backstage work, and like they're running like trap doors and curtains, and they're moving like all the heavy equipment everywhere, like heavy lights and all that.
yeah, and he gets to go on the walkway above, and there's more people up there, right, and below. They're endlessly rehearsing a single part with stage managers and conductors and directors like tyrannizing over the
orchestra and the chorus. And
yeah, and yelling at them and belittling them, and it made me think of movies. Just the absolute army that it takes to make a movie.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was just this ginormous thing that's happening, and he's kind of like, why do we do this?
I know. He's just like, these musicians that are like being yelled at, he's just like, they're clearly miserable doing this. Like, they don't.
But they take it because it's their livelihood.
Yeah, they do it because that's what their job is. But it's almost like their like spirits like completely broken by just like the countless hours of just being berated by this conductor, and they're just like resigned to like the suffering during practice so that they can just live their life outside of it. It's just, there's no like all the people working in the on the performance, on the production, nobody's doing it because they actually care about it. They're all doing it because it's their job. Like, even the conductor, he's not like, oh, this is my life's work or something. He's like, no, we have to do this right because of the show, sort of a thing. Nobody's passionate about the opera. Nobody's putting it on because they have like some deep feeling about it. But he's describing it just in a much more.
Yeah, he's a good storyteller.
Yeah,
you can.
He's Leo Tolstoy. He's going to be able to write that far better than we could ever explain it. So you have to just read it yourself.
It's fun to read.
But he just conveys like how like resigned to misery everybody is in this production, and he just asks why.
Yeah.
Like, why are people going through this? Like, and like he like really goes into, it's like, how much money and time is spent producing this stuff. And he's like, how many people like die on like kind of the back end of some of these things? Because like he talks about even like printing a book, and he's an author. He's like, because back then in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, whenever he wrote this, what year was it? I don't know, but you know, printing a book involved setting like lots of type and like lots of heavy equipment. I guarantee you people like lost like fingers and stuff making books back then. Because and it's like, just to write a book, and he's like, how many like just stupid books get made back then? You know, kind of thinking about like a lot of people put a lot of time, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into the making these things that these artists produce. And it's kind of important, if that's the case, that the artist really thinks about what they're making, if it's like really worthwhile. And that's kind of like the whole point of him doing this, I think. Because, I mean, he explains at the end, he's like, I've spent like 15 years thinking about this. And basically, this essay is just him compiling all of his thoughts in a coherent way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's ultimately with the purpose of when you're making art, are you actually like thinking about that? Because it's in a way he's putting it in very dramatic perspective, where it's like this very grave task that people are put to just to make this art happen. Which, I mean, you think about it, kind of is true.
Yeah.
Even today, where things are not as like, say, you're gonna get crushed by like a 5-ton press for a book or something, or get crushed by a falling piece of stage equipment. Here's much, but it's still like, there's a lot of things where there's a lot of people behind what needs to be made to do whatever it is you're doing. So it's like, are you making that worthwhile?
Here's the pop culture tangent. Not a tangent, an illustration, but that just came to mind. Just simply because it's very interesting. So with Studio Ghibli, and I might be getting this story partially wrong. Who knows? It's hearsay. But
Yeah.
You've got the director whose name I do not know, who is essentially Miyazaki's close friend and protege, who does Whispers of the Heart, which is like a charming little movie. And then that is just before Miyazaki starts Princess Mononoke.
Mm-hmm.
And Miyazaki essentially goes like Captain Ahab on Princess Mononoke.
Mm-hmm.
It's super over budget. Everyone is like working day and night. And this guy was working on it, and I think kind of the common interpretation is he more or less like worked himself to death.
Mm-hmm.
And Miyazaki retired for the first time directly after Mononoke because, I mean, there might have been several reasons, but because he essentially thought he like killed his friend.
Yeah.
By making Mononoke. But I've just seen things in recent years where people are like, "Oh man, Mononoke is great, but think of how bad like the working conditions were on that movie."
Mm-hmm.
Because there's like kind of like complaint about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just this idea of something. Again, I always think of movies because they're just these giant productions where a gajillion people have to work on them. Like grueling hours.
Yeah.
I once was on, when I was trying to decide what to do, I spent a week on a film set and decided I never wanted to be on a film set ever again.
That's like when I did VFX and I was like, no.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this.
But
I didn't have to do anything too crazy, but I got enough of a taste of it. It's like, no, I don't want to be a part of this.
yeah, that's a lot of what Leo Tolstoy is talking about. And he kind of says in there, I don't remember if he says it specifically or if this was me like reading between the lines, but yeah, like he's in the book, he's like kind of imploring us to be thoughtful, whereas movies are like a money making thing that in some way could be like running off the track, kind of like the opera. But
Yeah.
in the it's just like you make a movie and you're making more movies to make more movies to make more money because it's like, I mean, but people are digging it.
But I mean, that's the thing though, is like he goes into that too, where he's like, I mean, that's a big part of where he starts getting into talking about counterfeit art and how most artists actually, because they are professional, their actual job of it is less about actually creating true art, and
Yeah.
it's more about, oh, I have this audience, I have these people that I want, that what I'm producing is simply to please them.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it gets more into almost more of like a political worldview of Tolstoy, but he goes into like how the rich just eventually just effectively abandoned any sense of spirituality, and art just simply became a form of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just started patronizing artists to produce amusement for them, basically. That's a big part of what he basically, where he argues the origin of what he calls counterfeit art.
And you can that's what you could really like in the our movies are some movies more than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that's like the critique you could levy against pretty much. You say, like, is it made for amusement? And there's like it's like a whole like a gradation, right? Because you could have like a TV show that maybe has like I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know, like Next Generation or something. But any number like there's a lot that like you know that are like thoughtfully made, even though they might be campy or silly or have like fun. Like the topic might be fun, and there might be like good things embedded in it.
Well, I think Tolstoy kind of talks about that. What did he? I just read it today. But he basically says something along the lines of, because he talks early on about like what is art, what is beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he's like, art doesn't have to be beautiful. And just because something's beautiful, it's not art.
Yeah.
And I think it's when he's talking about, he's complaining, he's basically saying art school's stupid. And he's like, I'd rather somebody produce something that's like a amateurish thing that comes from a sincere place than somebody who has like amazing technical ability and just created like, oh, that's a interesting thing. Basically, he's like, one could be very beautiful, but ultimately without sentiment, and then something could just be very simple but carry like a weight to it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it doesn't have to be. So for Tolstoy, there's like a complete disconnect between like how excellently done something is and how artistic it is. It really ultimately comes down to the intent and sentiment, basically, of the artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful and genuine.
Basically.
Yeah.
That's kind of an encapsulation. There's no way to like simplify it, but he really goes into a lot of detail about it. Like he spends chapters going through
The
that.
beauty thing. It's funny because, like I said, I read this years ago and I completely forgot this, or maybe it never soaked in the first place. But that's actually, if you had asked me like a couple weeks ago to define art, I would have gone at it almost exactly how he starts, where he's like, yeah, the average person who's never given it any thought will just say, oh, it's beauty.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, dang it. It's like
Well,
exactly how I would have.
Well, it sounds like sounds right. But I mean, he gives pretty good arguments of why that isn't the case.
Yeah.
And I think he's convinced me on that for sure. But no, it's really interesting how he points out that. Also, the fact that he goes through a lot of different languages about it, and he brings up the point of in Russian,
Yeah,
the word for beauty is strictly visual.
that was super
And
interesting.
I'd never thought about that, but as somebody who speaks 2 languages, that it wasn't like surprising, but I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. I'd forgot that, yeah, languages can be play around with concepts like that.
Well, yeah,
And
'cause
so
he's-
when you start thinking about that, you're like, in a way, each language is dealing with beauty in particular when he's going through the different aesthetics, philosophy stuff, is they're all trying to approach the same like fundamental concept, but it's almost like each language is going to be carrying with it kind of a different inherent approach to it almost. Like there's this thing that you can't actually define that exists in like the human spirit. And the word we use in English is beauty, and in Russian it's something else, but it's like they're all aspects of something. And so it's like in a way it's like what is actually meant there? Because yeah, in English you can say, "Oh, that's a beautiful idea," or
Yeah,
"This song is beautiful."
you have a beautiful soul.
But in Russian,
A painting is beautiful.
yeah, a painting's beautiful, a song is pleasant. Right? Like you don't have beautiful music in Russian. You have like pleasant music or exciting music or melancholy music. And so it's just interesting how there's like different, like that thought of it is like,
Yeah.
oh, I did.
And what he gets
It's a
at
good
there
point.
is he says, I think if I recall, French, English, and German all have it so that beauty can get conflated with, or essentially just mean goodness.
Yeah.
Like, where like they become, like essentially it becomes the point where beauty just means goodness.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Again, because if I like say like, oh, he has like a beautiful heart.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not saying he has a visually
You're saying that.
aesthetically pleasing to my eyes heart. I'm like saying he has a good heart.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he points that out. And it's a good point. Just because something is beautiful doesn't mean that it's good.
Oh, it's
And just because something's ugly doesn't mean that it's bad.
Yeah.
But there is definitely that like an inherent conflation in English.
Yeah. There's too many good points. I'm like, again, when I was reading it, I was like, I need to read this like 3 more times before anything soaks in. And I was trying to I didn't bring my notes, which is stupid. But I was like,
I like stopped keeping notes because I was like, I just need to get through this because when I take notes, I go way slower.
yeah, that's actually I pretty much only took it for the first part. And I'm trying to remember because,
most of the notes I have are on like the initial part when he's going through the different philosophies. Let me see what else I have in here.
I know, I'm like, oh, let me grab my book. Yeah, so he takes down the beauty idea. That he gives that like a pretty solid takedown. Which again is kind of fun because that's 100% how I would have answered. Oh yeah, he basically is just like, well, all of the all of the definitions of beauty before he even gets to like the real kind of like definitions he cares about. He goes through like the thousands of definitions of beauty, and he's like, they all just mean nothing. And I'm trying to remember why. Oh, because they're all essentially. Let's see if I can put this thought. Remember this thought. Oh, how does he word it? It's like right. It's in here somewhere. Where is it? I can't find it. I can't remember exactly how he words it, but he's essentially saying, he's like, if you say some, like if you're like essentially beauty is the thing that you're like, I like it because it's beautiful, and it's beautiful because I like it. Like that, like beauty. He says all the definitions kind of reduce down to like beauty is what like a certain group's likes at that time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wish I had like. I don't even think I took notes on this part. It's just like coming back to my head, and I'm like, oh yeah, I liked that. What did he say? But we can move. We can move on
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I'd have to look through.
It's so like dense. I'm like trying to. Also, it doesn't help that my book is so teeny tiny.
Yeah. Well, yeah, most of the notes I have are from early on. But yeah, it's just him being like, is art so important that such sacrifices must be made?
Yeah.
Like him talking about all the money and effort and blood,
Yeah.
basically, that goes into all of that.
One thing though.
And when and then he talks about, kind of in reference to his theater experience, where it's like all this effort to produce this art transgresses on human love, which is like kind of a intense statement, but like the way he's like puts it forward, you're like, and having like worked in environments kind of like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's not wrong. Like there's a point at which like you're doing that sort of a thing and it's like inhuman, like the way you're going about it and the way it's just like this like machine happening, and it's like you're not, I don't know, it's definitely like a weird thing.
Yeah, this.
Also, yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, a society that produces art must consider what constitutes art and if it is good. I mean, he even brings that question up where he's like, is art even like worthwhile? It's like, it's like perhaps art is useless or maybe even harmful. Like he's like, because he's really like trying to be comprehensive with it. He'll just like ask like questions like that.
Yeah,
He's like, is art even a good thing?
Yeah, he also,
Yeah.
I don't remember how he worded it. Again, these are my words, but essentially, what did he say? He essentially says that, like from another angle, is we almost can't help it though.
Yeah.
Like, because he's like, art is like it's like a fundamental human activity.
Yeah.
Like people do it. Like it's not. Like it exists everywhere.
Well, he even gives example of like societies that basically tried to abolish it.
Yeah.
Going like various Protestant and like Islamic sects that were like iconoclastic. And it's like still within those they still would produce
Yeah.
some form of art. It would just be a different approach, but they'd still just produce art. Like you actually can't stop it.
Yeah, you can't help it.
It's a fundamental human urge that comes out of just human society. Because again, I think his point of it being a form of communication is right. And that's probably why, in the same sense, like, if somebody knows how to write, they're going to write.
Yeah, it's
If they know how to talk, they're going to talk.
it's like the yeah, and that's his again for the definition. That's his kind of like fundamental definition. Is it's like the communication of feeling.
Yeah.
So it's not the communication of like a discursive idea.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, which has been like a something I've thought about for a long time. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like the communication of a feeling. Although that, and I for a long time I've kind of wanted to like get down on art that's like too intellectual, but a lot of like really great stuff, it kind of has both, especially if it's a thing with words, like a movie or a book.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
Poetry can weirdly actually kind of be free from it sometimes, and like just have the words, like you said, be like a painting.
Yeah.
But like I think, like a film or a book that we really love usually kind of has both. Like it evokes like some strong feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and it has like ideas. Because I've been kind of grouchy about that for a long time, as I've wanted. I mean, we get a lot of media that's heavy on the intellectual ideas.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I just read it today. He's talking about critics in
Mhm.
particular. He lays into art critics pretty hard, but he brings up the point of if the art needs words to define it, then is it really art at that point? Because the artist should have just like said or wrote the words and done the same thing. And that kind of connects into the idea of just producing, say, a movie that's just heavy on idea, like just intellectual idea rather than like sentiment. It's like you could have just like wrote that down and it would be like the same. But yeah, I liked his art critic thing. Again, it's similar to what Tanizaki is when he's like talking about. He also complains about art critics,
Oh, that's
or in Praise of Shadows, where he's like, pictures are judged on like words or something, and then in Tolstoy's quote, he like quotes like a friend of his where he's like, "Yeah, I had a friend that told me art critics are just the stupid discussing the wise." It's like, that's pretty mean. But then he goes into just like, basically, art critics don't have the ability to be infected by art, and that's why they just talk about it. Because they actually don't know how to elicit feelings from experiencing art, so all they can do is like intellectualize it. That's his idea. I don't know if he's right or not, but it's just interesting, like his like theories on why you even have art critics and like what kind of people those are. And his is very much almost like these people are soulless. It's like, don't pay attention to them.
I mean, it's funny because
I don't know if I've ever read like any art critic or anything, but I'd imagine.
I don't think I've ever seen anything that portrays them nicely.
No.
It's and yet
They
they
exist.
exist and will probably exist forever because I was just thinking
There's some sort of demand for
I've been going
that.
through a little like Nietzsche. No, I don't. It's not really a phase. It's just a little more Nietzsche, but yeah, he also just hates him. And I'm like, I think everybody does. But um what was I had a thought about it. Oh, no, yeah, no, I can I can see it cuz I'm guilty of it. I was actually telling my wife the other day that part of the reason that I don't like intellectualizing like too much intellectualization in art is because I'm guilty of it
Mm-hmm.
and I'm trying to like escape it.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, in a way. So, I mean, we exist within like a pretty different like social context from Tolstoy, but
yeah,
in a way, like his points about art becoming mere amusement for the wealthy, in a way, is something that's like permeated everything. So now it's just like everybody. That's the like mindset of everybody now.
yeah,
That's why part of it I'm like convinced by his points on that because I'm like I feel like to an extent that talks about how I feel sometimes. And that like less so now, but definitely there's been points in time in my life where it's like, oh yeah, I definitely probably looked at art that way. Not that I had like thought about it, but um, the way he talks about kind of the rich of his day and their approach to art
yeah,
and music and all that is like it's like okay, that's definitely still a relevant point. It's just worse now.
yeah. Because you could just say instead of like it's just turned into amusement for the wealthy, you could just say it's just turned into amusement. Full stop.
Yeah, it's just amusement.
Yeah,
Um, which is kind of depressing to think about, especially the way he like when you really start to like think about because he brings up like some point of oh what was it? He's talking about like a short story read in like a random magazine.
yeah,
Talking about like a woman and her kids, then they like leave the flour out and it gets eaten or something, and they have to make like rye bread instead of a cake, something like that.
uh huh,
And he's like, I felt way more from that, and I don't even know who wrote it, than I did from I don't remember who. He mentioned some famous other contemporary artist, uh, author. He's like, because the story was just written by somebody who felt a need to write this story because it connected into something that they had felt. You know, they had experienced something that made them feel the way that inspired them to write that, and he felt that from that. And it was just like some amateur anonymous story. The great Tolstoy was like, "This is awesome. This is actually art." Also, he like gives the example when he's like was had a little like depression walk where he was just walking around. Where he's like, "I was out walking, kind of depressed, as you do." Essentially, he says, and then he like heard like just like some peasant women singing some song because his daughter was home, and he's like immediately I was like happy because it was a happy song for a happy occasion that wasn't It was just kind of organic. Like nobody knows who wrote the song that they were singing. It's just a song that they've sung for who knows how long. That has its place and occasion, and it's like carried through and has like its sentiment still there. Versus, his like chapter or two long thing of like the ring is stupid.
Yeah.
And that's like some supposedly masterpiece of music.
Well, that goes to the thing we were talking about when you read it and you're like, well, is anything art? But also, the like horizons of art are actually like really, really like there's like a whole lot of stuff is art. Like he talks also about like lullabies.
Yeah.
Like a lullaby. Is that like? I mean, even by his definition, it's not like it's like you're not like I don't know communicating. I don't know if a baby could like be communicated to. I'm just thinking about it now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like this like lovely like thing that you do.
Mm-hmm.
That like carries with it that feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like what are some of the I'm trying to remember some of his other like examples that are kind of like outside of like the like art school art list. I'm trying to remember because there were a couple I liked.
I don't remember. The two main ones I remember are just those two big ones. The peasant song and the short story. But I mean, there's a lot of major art stuff too that he's like, yeah, that was art.
Yeah.
Where he's like, yeah, Da Vinci produced real art, or like Bach produced real art. He's like, Beethoven did until he went deaf, and then he was producing nonsense. That's a funny one. I liked his thing on that. He's like, I love music, and at one point in time, I used to really like all of Beethoven's stuff, even his later works. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, wait, it's actually not that good. And it's because he couldn't hear. He was actually deaf at that point.
That's a pretty hot take.
Yeah, he's like,
because I don't even know if
he's just basically like Beethoven, once he lost his hearing, basically couldn't produce like worthwhile music anymore. Which, I mean, sounds harsh, but then you think about it, it's like, I mean, he's probably not wrong.
Well, I really, really like Beethoven, but I don't know if it's ever like occurred to me not to like Beethoven.
Yeah, I mean,
it's hard.
He brings up that point too,
so,
of
like,
people where they're like, he's just like, people now just, they like something because they know that they're supposed to like it.
Yeah, but
or it's like, oh,
but Beethoven like forces. It's like what he's talking about, like art that like conveys the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Beethoven like forces you to like it because it's so effective.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I'd almost have to.
I'd have to like listen to, because I actually don't know what things are.
I don't know where like the line is drawn.
I don't listen to Beethoven very much, and I have no idea what the chronology of his works are. But now I'm like kind of curious to.
Me too.
To listen to like something really early on and then something like way later and see if it's like, oh shoot, yeah. I don't know.
Well, the funny thing is I used to listen to a lot more stuff like that just all the time. But then I got into all this stuff we talk about. And now I don't listen to like beautiful symphonies unless I can like sit down and give them attention. Because that feels correct. But that makes me listen to like way, way less of them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I should just pop them on in the gym like I used to. I mean, not like I also don't, I don't make me sound too cool. I listen to just like whatever pop stuff too in the gym.
Yeah.
But sometimes I would.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
is easy with Beethoven because it's pretty like intense sometimes.
Yeah, you could have some good classical workout music.
Yeah, there's some that's pretty. Yeah.
I mean, I've done that before. I've played classical music at the gym.
Yeah.
Not that often, but I have done it.
But yeah, I got the idea in my head where I was like, no, I'm gonna like, if I ever listen to this, I'll give it like the attention it deserves. So now I just like don't listen to it.
Yeah.
Because it's.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like in a way with that music in particular, you kind of have to actually like go to a place.
Yeah, it's way better.
And actually have people perform it. I think it's okay to like listen to it while you're doing other stuff if it's just on Spotify or something.
Yeah.
Because
it's way better.
Yeah.
I was last time I went to a classical concert, I was like shocked at how I was super like into it. Like there was a part where like it was like the whole orchestra was like swaying with the music, and so was like the whole audience, and I like, stopped and kind of like observed it, and I was like, this is super cool.
No,
like the whole room was just like moving.
I mean, it is a concert.
Yeah, it was cool.
But yeah, I mean, speaking of some of that, I mean, when he's talking about when he was like at the watching The Ring and him going on about that, he basically says that the only reason people like it is because they feel like they have a duty to like it. Because he's just like, I don't get what people see in this. Part of it might be just he's being a curmudgeon, but it's interesting. He definitely gives a good shot at it.
Yeah.
Because he's basically saying, he's like, I don't know. He has some interesting points because he has a lot to say about it. I know when he starts that segment, he's like, he's trying to, like, Wagner's trying to make the music subservient to poetry or something, and trying to at the same time elevate both of them into something else. And he's basically like, that's impossible. It's like either you make music as like an excellent thing or you do poetry as an excellent thing. I'm not quite sure. I don't know. I'd have to like go over that in detail because he kind of gives like a whole like logic breakdown of how that makes sense to him. But he complains about that a lot. He's like, I don't get what people like about this guy. But that's like the new thing though in his day. So he's like complaining about the newfangled popular stuff. He's like, I don't get what people like about this guy. And he's like talking about like all the people, like the stuff on the stage is really stupid. This is dragon. It's supposed to be imposing, but it's only going to be imposing if you're like 7. If you're 7 years old, it might be scary, but otherwise it just looks like something from like a carnival. And it's like these stupid actors up there with their stupid tights on, swinging their hammers like nobody ever would. He's just like, everybody looks stupid. But I think his point, though, because when he's like, basically says like, this is like the epitome of counterfeit art. And he goes through his different points of like the different things that make it counterfeit art. Like that, was it like, I think I have it written down. That's actually a good thing to bring up would be his points on counterfeit art. Borrowing, imitating,
I'm glad you took notes.
striking effects, and what he just calls interesting or interestingness. He's like, those are like the means of counterfeiting the effects of true art.
I'm glad you took a
And
note on that because I'm like, oh, I wish
'Cause
I
I
could.
think that's like a pretty important. I took a note on that because like that's an important. It's an important part of his whole argument because he spends a lot of time talking about counterfeit art. It's like half of it,
Yeah.
or like the last like third or something. But he's basically saying Wagner does all four of them. And it makes it a very effective piece of counterfeit art. And that's why people really like it. Because it so approximates so many things. Because it's like the mythology of like the world in The Ring isn't anything. It's like vaguely Norse, but it's actually not. You know? So it's like borrowing from it. You know, it's imitating things from other works. It's just has lots of flashy effects. You know, and then just doing things that are novel and different for the sake of it. That
Oh, here's the Beethoven stuff. What, the Ninth Symphony is not a good work of art? I hear exclaimed by indignant voices. My reply, it most certainly is not. Yikes.
Oh, I'd love to. Oh,
Where's...
I feel like that would have been fun to be at a get together with Tolstoy and just see him like get into arguments with people over things like that. Just some people are talking about like, oh man, I love this Beethoven song. And he's like, that sucks. And they're like, what? They're like, it's so good. He's like, no, actually it sucks. And let me rant to you on exactly why. Let me break down at point by point why actually you're objectively wrong. Because I spent 10 years thinking about it.
Whatever, that's the worst kind of person at a party.
It's fun to observe it.
Yeah.
I think it'd be funny. Everybody else would probably be miserable.
I don't think, again, I guess it's if I can observe from a safe distance, if I have to be like captured within like the sphere of it, I'm pretty miserable. If I'm like on the other side of the room, like munching on chips, I'm pretty happy camper. Oh man, when I was reading through this, I was like, I think I'll just like kind of. Usually when with a book, you're like, I kind of like you almost like kind of remember where stuff is. I mean, I've got the Wagner, the Wagner part here, but I'm like,
It's long.
I know, it's not like.
It's a big section.
I'm like, as my eyes glance over it, I'm like, I'm just lost.
Well, most of it's him basically being like, this happened in the play,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
then this happened,
This
and
was-
it was stupid.
That's what's happening here.
He's like, you have to read this whole dang little booklet that goes with the thing. That's like crazy, because he's... How many
Yeah.
pages did he say it was? It was like a 200-page, like, booklet you got with the thing or something crazy. It was like sounded like a big... He's like, yeah, and then this part of the production went on for like 18 pages of the booklet. You're like, how big is this thing? You're
I've
like,
actually-
"Jeez."
I've always been curious to see what it would be like to go to like an actual like the whole big Wagner opera that's like
6 hours long.
yeah
That sounds unbearable,
yeah
actually.
well
I don't blame Tolstoy
It's
for
hard-
like getting like an hour and be like, there's 5 more hours of this.
Yeah.
I'm just leaving. He like turns to his friends like, I'm gonna leave. This is awful, and they're like, no, come on, stay. You gotta stay. It gets better. And he stays, and he's like, it's just the same thing. This all this stuff literally just happened. He's like, I'm gonna die.
Well, when
he's you can just like feel how miserable he is
Yeah.
at that. He's just like, this sucks. I don't know. It could be interesting. I don't know.
I've always wanted to, but
Just
I think
to
it would
do
be.
it.
I'm not much of a play person, and when I've seen chunks of like Wagner plays,
You're like,
they
ugh.
look pretty dreadful. Like it'd be a slog. I think it might be a thing that
Well-
belonged to a certain time and place.
How often is that even put on?
Pretty rarely.
I wonder
I think you have to
If-
you have to go to some big city where they're
where
spec-
they're
like you
doing
like
it.
because
Well-
there's the whole thing is on YouTube and it's like the New York. It was put on
Yeah.
in New York somewhere
Yeah.
for like a couple of years.
Well, if they ever do it in Salt Lake, we should just go.
Yeah, I mean I
Just to do it.
hopefully it'll be a long time from now and we'll both be super curmudgeonly old men. We'll be like, "Rawr."
We can be like who are the Muppet guys?
Oh yeah, Statler and something Waldorf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been curious, but
Not that curious.
curious enough that I would do it.
Like if it happened to be around.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
You're not gonna go seek it out though.
Well, because like you said, it's probably gonna be hard. It's not gonna be fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll get swept up in it. I really like Wagner preludes.
Mhm.
They're super pretty.
Mhm.
And then like the opera starts and you're like, oh gosh. 'Cause, I mean, also it's an opera. Oh, it's an opera.
It's rough. I mean, if they're really good singers, it could be cool.
Yeah.
But even then, it depends.
I feel like after reading stuff for years and years, I get the impression that even at opera's height, a lot of people didn't like opera. I was like,
Oh.
I don't know. I mean, it feels like it was the thing, but
I mean,
I
people
always read-
still like it.
I always read
But-
stuff, yeah, where people. I'm trying to remember who it was. I don't even remember his name. It's like Scheller or something. It's a thing I tried to read recently, which is like this. When I was a German idealist guy talking about aesthetics, and he was like, "Why do people go to the opera?" I can't remember.
Good question.
I can't remember.
I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've been to an opera.
I've been to two.
I've been to like ballets before. I've seen the Nutcracker.
Also kind of hard to sit through. I didn't.
That one also depends a lot, because it can be really cool, but also it can not be.
Well,
Because that depends a lot, I guess, on how well done it is.
I'm sorry, little
Which
ballet in
that's
Cache
kinda-
Valley, Utah. I don't know if you were like the most stellar.
Yeah.
You're right. Maybe if it's like this huge, I don't know.
It has to. They have to counterfeit it right. How
Yeah.
good at counterfeiting is a production crew?
Yeah.
Do they make it interesting?
How
You
swept-
gotta at least do that. Gotta have some cool set pieces and costumes and stuff.
Yeah, how swept up in the spectacle can you make me be?
Yeah, how striking can you make the effects? That because on the actual production end on that's what you can do. You can't really do the the borrowing and the imitating, because that's done when it's like written.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you still could a little bit,
Yeah.
but
I feel like that would be if you like were like, stick like a modern dance section here, something like that.
yeah,
'Cause that's what the kids these days
put
feeding.
some meme stuff in there. Meme references in the Nutcracker.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, his points on like what counterfeit art is interesting, because it has a lot to do with his point about like professional artists and their approach to art being essentially trying to do stuff for a very select group of clients, basically. At least in his day, it's like they're basically just trying to get rich people to pay them
Yeah.
to produce whatever. And so they would make stuff with them in mind. Not really people in general, just like, oh, I want this Duke to pay me money to make them whatever, a painting, or I want them to commission me to write a symphony or something, rather than, oh, I just want to do this. I have a drive to produce this thing.
And like you said earlier, nowadays, it's like the same problem. It's like the exact same but reversed, in that people want to have like the broadest of appeals.
Yeah. But the thing is
Get, like-
that broadest of appeal now, it's not, it's like both things.
Yeah.
They're trying to do broad appeal, but also not out of like a sincere intent to like communicate anything, but just
Yeah, it's a
I want
broad appeal,
it's
so
like
you
I
can-
want as many people to give me money as possible.
Yeah, you're like, I made this film and it fills the 4 quadrants or whatever that is.
Yeah.
We got families and hardcore fans.
Yeah. Yeah, whatever the
Yeah, I don't remember what the. I remember what those are. I don't care.
it's like we're complaining about that. Yeah, that's an interesting point. But yeah, fundamentally his idea there still kind of connects.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's just the context of it's different. But yeah, because the idea of just the idea that art as a profession inherently kind of taints the artist's ability to actually produce art. Which, I mean, I don't know how much that's true in like the strict sense of, oh, because you're getting money from it. Or if it's just like you're more likely to be driven, like have perverse incentives for why you're producing the art.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could be a sincere artist that does make a living producing art.
Mm-hmm.
But also you could be just as much of a true artist and not. Right? But it depends. Like if again, like your intent is like kind of the key thing there. Because you could also be an artist that is insincere and makes a living doing it, and all you're doing is trying to appeal to whoever it is just to get them to get you money, to give them the thing that they want, to amuse them.
What if you're a very, very, very sincere artist and you are very sincerely painting rainbows and dolphins and oceans? where you can see all the many fish. And the dolphins are jumping like all around the rainbows. And also you can see the full night sky.
And the bottom of the ocean all at once.
Yeah, and like
Saturn.
Yeah, and an Aztec pyramid.
And a waterfall.
Yeah.
And a horse.
But you like these things move you, and you really you're like, oh, I love all of these things.
I always forget the name of that artist.
I don't know.
It's like something Christensen or something. He's from like Hawaii.
Yeah.
I always forget. I always forget his name, and I think about him every once in a while.
There's been like a puzzle. I don't know if it's I think it's by him, but a puzzle like that just sitting behind our TV for like the entirety we've lived there. You've seen it, the one with like orcas.
I know
and
exactly.
I'm always like, I'll like peek back there and be like, why are you there? Like, why is this puzzle there? with orcas swimming in a vibrant, way too saturated, like, sea of magical glowing teal and and you can see like the entire barrier reef in space. And the orcas are so majestic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what if you're super sincere? You're like, oh, that's a thought. Another thing. So, we've had some other the stuff we've talked about, like in the Book of Tea, where there's an attitude, you gotta have the right attitude when approaching the art. Like, not just making the art, but you gotta have the right attitude in approaching the art.
Yeah.
And so that's, like, at play here, too. How you talked about it, I can't remember what he said. I can't remember anything in this book.
Because there's too much.
I know, but...
but he talks about... I can't remember exactly what he says, but he basically talks about sort of like the ability to be infected.
Yeah, because it's...
And it's something that is almost like learning how to read or something.
Yeah. Yeah, like... So again, the definition basically being art's like this communion between two people, and it can be through, like, throughout time, which is... that's also a cool concept. But, but it's like the artist conveys this feeling, and then the person who experiences the piece of art feels it. But learning to feel like that person is participating as much as the artist. Like in that experience.
Yeah.
I'd say that definitely feels like something where I don't feel like a lot of stuff. I'm not like, ooh, my goodness. I feel like just in the last few years, I've like been growing like more sensitive, whereas before it was... I would have like given you a funny look if you'd like talked about this. But even so, I'm one of the dumb ones.
No, it's just like reading things like this really, it's good because it helps you like kind of break out of your headspace.
Yeah.
With regards to these things. So you can be like, maybe I should be more mindful about when I look at something or listen to something, to at the very least be able to like do that. And like recognize like, oh, this is something somebody made. What? But I mean, part of that too is like you kind of sometimes you like look at something and you're like, I don't think that they felt anything making this. Because sometimes that is, if it's not. Which I mean, a few weeks ago when I ran into you at the grocery store and I mentioned that I'd gone to Springville to go to the art museum. I hadn't gotten that far into this book, but now like thinking about that now, and it's kind of something I'd intuited a little bit, sort of the same perspective Tolstoy has, is like looking at the difference between like the high schooler art and like actual more experienced artists' art. Whether or not that's art by Tolstoy's standard with some of that stuff is questionable, but from my perspective, just like looking at it and being like, what's actually fundamentally different between like some 18-year-old high school senior and like a, I don't know, a 60-year-old landscape painter from Magna. There's a bunch of like plein air landscape paintings there that are really nice from Utah, or like the Russian painters there. It's like, what's actually like the difference? There's definitely a skill difference, but also there is like a just life experience difference, and like what they're actually able to convey and how they're like thinking about what they're doing. Like those more experienced artists are a lot more deliberate. You know, they're not just like, oh, I played The Last of Us once, so I made a bust of a zombie out of clay. Like, I mean, this is cool, I guess, but you were just thinking, I liked that video game. You know, which is totally different than, here's my beautiful painting of like these girls that just graduated school by some Soviet artist from like 1957, where you're like, these are very different. You know, like what they're conveying and like the subject matter and like the skill of it, and just fundamentally what those people were feeling when they made that art. Because then even within the high school art, you know, there's some that's clearly more like thought through on that level. I'd say most of it is like not very good. But what do you expect from a high school art? Can't expect too much. But it's definitely, seeing that contrast was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Especially now, like thinking back after reading this. Because initially I was just like, the high school art was pretty lame. But I'm like, no, I mean, it wasn't very well done for the most part. But there's definitely some where I'm like, okay, some of this was a lot more effective than others. There was a lot where you just like kind of, I don't know, chuck this together. You're like, oh, would be interesting is if I did a picture of a fish flying through a forest. You're like, okay. I mean, you can do that.
But why?
But it's like, what? I don't feel anything when I see that. It's like, falls into the counterfeit category of like, interesting. It's interesting. It's something novel. Fish don't float through the air, they swim, but this fish is floating in the air. You know, stuff like that, where there's like a bunch of things like that. Or it's just, oh, remember that video game? I did a painting of that video game.
Yeah, I feel like in general the best you could expect from high school art is you're like, oh yes, I see like the beginning of technical talent.
Basically, yeah. It's like, because some of you are like, okay, this was like technically decently done, but it's also like,
And then
not anything.
young adult art, or I guess you would say college, but it doesn't have to be college, is what I've talked about. Where then you get like we were in animation, but it's like a filmmaking major, and you've got, suddenly you're like, oh yes, I'm going to say something,
Mm-hmm.
and so you get I guess, yeah, young adult art, college art. It's like, I'm saying something,
Yeah.
and it's usually some trendy cultural idea.
Yeah. I mean, that's where you get into the intellectualization of it. You're like, I'm trying to convey some high concept with it. Right.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I don't know what category that goes into. That's like a trying to create interest sort of a thing. Trying to, in a way, it's borrowing just from some idea that you heard somewhere.
Borrowings,
That's a big one. I mean, that's kind of what I did this painting of this video game. It's like, oh, I'm just borrowing from this thing,
mm-hmm.
this other thing, and in a very blatant way. I mean, that's what fan art is. It's where it's so from the Tolstoy perspective, a fan art where it's look at this thing of Zelda I made. He's like, that's not art. You're just literally just copying what somebody else did. Where he talks, what did I write it down? Yeah, that something being poetic just means that it's borrowed or poetical or something.
Huh.
But because he brings up he's like, oh yeah, I had this acquaintance, this woman that wanted to show me this novel she wrote. And he's just like, it's about this poetic lady with poetic long hair in a poetic landscape where she met this poetic guy with these two poetic dogs, and it was all very poetical. But he's just going on. It's this story was just, she's just taking things that already are from other things basically and just mashing them together, where it's I heard this thing and it was cool in this thing that I read.
Yeah.
What if I had that in here? Oh, I like this other thing. What if I put that in here? I don't know exactly what all it... I'm sure there's some specific things that were kind of being referenced that would have made more sense in his day. But basically he's saying she was borrowing stuff from other things that she'd read or heard or whatever that she liked. And I mean, that's basically what fan art is. It's basically I think he's basically critiquing this woman's fanfic. Basically. But the way he says it is so funny because he's the poetic this and the poetic that, and he's just it's all the same nothing. It's kind of reading that part though. He's I was just this is kind of mean because you're saying this is just this person though he does call it saying is she died a while ago.
Oh, okay, there we go.
It's oh, okay. It's because he also says yeah, and she's stupid. You're jeez. Because he starts it out saying almost oh yeah, she's kind of a friend of mine, but also she's stupid and she's dead. Oh, his curmudgeonliness is really funny to me, and is kind of, he definitely has a bit of a mean-spiritedness to some of the stuff he says, but also he's and let me give you why I'm right about that. Why actually I think this play is stupid.
He's
and that
got
the people doing it are like idiots.
yeah, he's got like
But yet you're also like,
he's
this
got
is
like
so
the
mean.
it's one of those things where the problem is the person's pretty much always right. Um, one of those,
He's one of those always right people.
which also suck. Um, but he has it's like it's it, how would I say how would I describe the feeling? He's like the old expert who's just had it with the BS.
Yeah.
Who like doesn't he's like doesn't want to put on his like deal with the nonsense anymore.
I mean, how old do you think he was when he wrote this?
I don't know.
I think he's older.
I think so.
I don't know. I didn't
I
look
don't
into
know
it too
I
much.
don't know the Leo Tolstoy timeline.
No. All I know is that it's sometime in either the late 1800s or early 1900s, because he's referencing stuff as if it's recent and like, oh yeah, just in like 1894 this happened. And it's like, okay, so it's around that time. I don't know where. Also, I know it's like he's writing it prior to World War One. I'm pretty sure he doesn't reference that at all. So it's somewhere like around like 1900 plus or minus like 6-ish years or something.
Yeah, and Hegel's the last. Hegel's like the end of like the philosophers he references.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just add him to my list of like if Miyazaki came to visit, I'd hide under the table.
Yeah.
If
It's like one of those things where it's like it's fun to like read his stuff, but
Yeah.
also it's like you can definitely tell it's like if you're in the room with this guy, he's like he is going to be judging you really hardcore.
Yeah.
But it also means that he might say something really nice. But if you do something that he thinks is stupid,
But how could
he will like he's gonna write that down, and then forever people will be like, that guy that Tolstoy didn't like was an idiot, and he's gonna write it in a way where everybody will be 100% convinced that you're stupid.
Yeah.
So don't make him think you're stupid. But also he's dead, so whatever.
He's dead, so he can't get
I don't
me.
have to. He can't hurt me now. I don't have to worry about that problem.
I don't know. Thoreau's ghost like follows me around.
Is he like that?
Oh, Thoreau's like that, but he's way worse because the more you think about Thoreau, the more you're like you're just like a whiny guy. But like when you first read Walden in early college, and it like kind of blows your mind,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, whoa, Thoreau.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Walden's really great, but like the more you like reflect on him, the more you're like, oh man, this guy would suck. And I guess he kind of did. He's like a grouchy, judgmental hipster.
From like forever ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, when
Way better to hang out with Ralph Waldo Emerson. He'd be a delight.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, like ever since reading that, Thoreau's ghost kind of like haunts me. It's been like a decade, so
It's been a long
you
time.
gotta be careful. These guys can get you.
I feel like I read Walden in like high school. I don't remember a whole lot, except that like generally kind of vaguely what it is. He's like hanging out in his cabin he built pretending to be out in the wilderness, but he's actually just like
Yeah.
10 minutes from town or
Yeah,
something.
no, exactly. He's like, boy, I'm roughing it out here. Sometimes I walk back into town and like spend the night at Ralph Waldo Emerson's house, where it's actually warm, and I get to eat like good food.
Man, yeah. I mean, considering how much Tolstoy must have been like a pretty cool guy to be around, because it sounds like he hung out with people a lot.
Maybe
Mentions he's like
probably.
invited to stuff all the time, and people like do stuff with him. Or maybe it's just because he was like a famous author. People
Yeah,
are like, oh,
he was like astronomically famous and wealthy for his time.
yeah, like he's definitely not an artist where it's like after he died, then he was recognized. He was like well known in his lifetime.
Yeah, he was superstar status.
Yeah. So it could have been that.
I mean, maybe he would have delivered all this with a delightfully wry smile, and
I don't know.
you couldn't help but chuckle.
But then
At
again,
his
you look
cutting remarks.
at pictures of him, and you're like,
Yeah, he doesn't
he's-
look very fun, does he?
you're just like looking at him like, this is like a grumpy, stern Russian guy. But the thing is, like, also like reading this, you're like, he definitely has a sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's not like jokes. It's
is.
more like it's just the way he'll say stuff. And you're like, you intended for me to laugh at that.
Yeah, it's-
like his thing where he's like, I don't know who enjoys this opera. I don't think anybody enjoys these. You know, he's like,
Snide.
I find it doubtful anybody like this. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, that's just like an extra little jab to make me chuckle, and I did. You know, he has like a bunch of little things in there. You're like, okay, you're making a point, but also that was like a funny way of doing it. But so I'm sure he was fine. He's fine until he starts like complaining about Beethoven's ninth or something, and everybody is surprised.
Maybe even then he's funny.
I don't know. We'll never know. I'm sure. I wonder if there's like, you'd probably have to speak Russian, but I'm sure there's like journal entries from somebody that had a party with him.
Yeah.
And it was like, this was awful, or actually it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, they're like, oh, he was such a wit.
Or it's just like, I'm never inviting him to a party again.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know. Because I'm sure there's some like Russian nobility from back then that was probably have some kind of journal entry.
Yeah.
Though it's like, did any of that survive the revolution? That's another question. I don't know. Maybe. I have no idea. Good chance that not, but
I mean, good chance there's probably
something.
Great,
there's got to be something.
yeah, probably a great deal of it.
There's got to be some random journal entries from people from like pre 1915 or whatever.
Yeah.
Whenever that happened. I don't know. I don't know enough about that.
Yeah. It's also interesting, and you're like, it's not enough time to learn everything about everything.
No. I mean, even just the topic of Tolstoy himself
Yeah.
is a lot.
Yeah, I read Anna Karenina in like senior year of high school, and that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't read any like other Tolstoy. besides these essays, and I've read like a bunch of nonfiction stuff by Tolstoy because I pretty much don't like read fiction. I just like to read nonfiction stuff. Like he has. Now I'm like, those two I just don't remember. But he has like a bunch of stuff on like Christianity and a bunch of stuff on like being an anarchist.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd be lying if I said I even remember.
I don't know.
Even though that wasn't even that long ago. It was like when I was about to graduate.
I mean, it's a little while now.
Yeah, but not as long as some things. Not as long as high school.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. So the takeaway was Leo Tolstoy cool at a party? We don't know.
It's up in the air.
It's up in the air. He could be insufferable.
But then again, he would have... The kind of parties he would have been at would have also probably been a good amount of people kind of like him.
Yeah.
Probably. I don't know what I don't know what his background is.
I don't either.
Is he just like a random dude? Or is he
nobility?
Or is he some kind of nobility?
I don't know.
I mean, it kind of... I get the impression he's just like a guy that wrote some stuff and got famous.
Let's find out.
Especially with like how much he talks about. Because he even says like, oh yeah, I have like this friend who's just like this peasant.
Yeah, well, I remember from the...
And he like talks a lot about just like his acquaintances that are just like random like town folk.
Yeah, from the essays that I just claimed I didn't remember anything. I do remember that he born into an aristocratic family.
Okay.
I remember that he doesn't, and you get it in here too. He doesn't think super highly of aristocrats.
No.
And he likes hanging out with vulgar people, is how I remember his.
Yeah.
He hangs out with vulgar people oft.
Yeah. No, he definitely... He doesn't have a whole lot of anything nice to say about the upper class people in his day. I mean, basically his argument of like the reason counterfeit art is because of them, but...
Oh, that's right. He's like a Christian super pacifist.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was in a war and didn't think that was cool. That's right, because the essay was called like Christian pacifism or something. I don't remember anything about him.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I don't... All I know is he's some kind of Christian something. Reading this essay, I got the impression that he's not Orthodox.
No, he's like...
Even though most Russians would be, especially then.
That was something that was kind of interesting about...
That's like kind of a...
About my book.
Thing.
Is that it has notes from the editor or the translator throughout talking about... I guess this is... I assume this and whatever can be read now is like the new version that's kind of been put back together.
Yeah.
But I guess it was super heavily censored when it came out because it was very critical.
Yeah, I could see that.
And so there's notes where it's like, oh, we like put this part back in from the original manuscript, whereas originally anything that there's kind of like the commentary is kind of funny. It's not quite as like, it has like a little voice of its own that's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like this whole section that was talking about, or like where he's talking about different religious art was taken out. Although in the next section when he talks about like he can go like open season on like English religion,
Yeah.
but he's not allowed to do that with Russian with the Russian Orthodox Church.
Yeah.
Although he makes like the same points.
He does. I mean, he brings up like a specific artist, like those contemporary to him. There, it's like everybody's saying this guy's stuff's so good, but actually, it sucks. And yeah, that guy did like paintings for churches or something in Russia.
Tolstoy, never having won a Nobel Prize during his lifetime, was a major Nobel Prize controversy and continues to remain one. Hope they talk about that at every Nobel Prize gathering. They're like, boy, we sure did Tolstoy wrong. All right, now back to whatever we're doing.
It's like, well, you can't do anything about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, who all won like the Nobel Prize for literature or whatever
Who knows?
during his lifetime? It's probably like a bunch of stuff you're like, it's kind of like when you look back at like old like Oscar Best Picture winners and you're like, what is this movie? It's like, what is this? You're like, nobody cares about this.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, it's like, that's the same year this other movie that everybody cares about. It's like there's like 5 other movies that everybody still watches from that year, and it's like nobody watches whatever the heck won.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. It's like, I'm sure if you went back and looked at all of the Nobel literature winners from his active time, you're probably gonna be like, I'm sure there's gonna be some where you're like, okay, yeah, but there's gonna be a lot where you're like, I don't know what this is.
Yeah.
Nobody cares about this. It's like, yeah. Anyway, what else? Is there anything else? This isn't
I don't know.
pretty much just
tired,
an overview. Yeah.
But I'm sure we could.
I'm getting tired.
Yeah.
Turd. Well, if there's nothing else.
Yeah, I have like 4 or 5 ideas, and I think all of them are not. They're like tertiary. They're not that important. I think we could call it.
All right.
Leo Tolstoy. Grand curmudgeon. We'll find
Add it
some.
to our. We need to find another.
Yeah, we'll find an
old
even more
curmudgeon.
curmudgeonly curmudgeon.
Because we've had Tanizaki, whoever. I always forget the name of the guy that did
Okakura.
Rem Koolhaas, and Leo Tolstoy. All of whom have a lot to complain about.
Yeah.
I'd say Okakura probably had the least complaining in his. Is a lot more specific of just about like talking about how cool tea ceremonies are.
Yeah, by the time
He definitely has complaints though.
Yeah, by the chapters we talked about, he doesn't complain a whole lot. It's more like the first where he's like, yeah, those Western people, am I right?
Yeah.
He's like, let me tell you how it really is.
Yeah. Alright. Well, I need to sleep. I have work.
I do too. I have children. Young children. Okay.
Alright. Goodbye.
The end.
The end.